So I'm going to call this meeting to order, and
we don't have Andy yet.
Oh, we don't have Andy yet. Okay, well, you know what? I'm going to read this little thing that you guys just heard last time because we have some new participants. So please be aware that this live council meeting is being recorded. Your personal information, including your image, voice, names, opinions, and any other personal information disclosed by you during the meeting is collected by the City of Roslyn under the Freedom of Information Protection of Privacy Act for the purpose of your participation in the public input. That's a lot of P's in a row. If you have any questions about the collection of your personal data, and please contact dco@roslyn.ca. And if you do not wish your personal information to be collected, please do not join the live council meeting. In order to run the public input period smoothly, if you wish to comment on an agenda item, please raise your hand, use that button, and hopefully I'll see it. And I will call on those who wish to speak by name. Okay, so that's our official bit. Hello, Thompson, I see you there. Okay. So I guess we're good. Now, the only thing I don't see is I don't see any members of the public.
Yeah, they're there.
Do you see them on your end?
Yeah, they're on the tab. There's 8 attendees, but one of them I think is Mr. Van Beek, who's the delegation for LCIC tonight.
Okay. Oh, there they are. Okay, great. I see them. I see them. I see them. That's good. Okay, so we're good to go. Okay, so first thing is public. I called this meeting to order, and then public input. Is there anyone of our attendees who is not a delegation who would like to speak to us? If so, raise your hand, and I will call on you. Nobody. Okay. I'm not seeing anyone, so I'm going to, if I miss you, I'll come back to you, but hopefully that works. I'll take a motion to adopt the agenda. Can I get a counselor? To Janice raises her hand, and probably somebody else, and Dirk. Okay, all in favor of the agenda as presented, raise your hands. And if you're opposed, call out, because I do not see you all on the same time, but I think we're good to go. Okay, registered petitions and delegations. First up, we have representatives from the Lower Columbia Initiatives Corporation, and Tim Gruitt is going to be there, and West Startup is going to be there, and I believe they are on our list. Well, Tim is. Oh, yep, there they are. Okay, so I'm unmuting both of you, hopefully. Tim, can you speak? You guys speak? So I know this is working.
Can you hear me now?
Ooh, speak up.
Can you hear me now? Is that good?
Barely, yeah, you're soft-spoken.
Oh, I try.
Welcome, Tim.
Thank you. Thank you. I have some of my entourage here as well.
Oh, okay.
So there's Bill Van Beek from the LCC DTS,
Hello,
as well
Bill.
as our chair and president, West Startup is here as well.
Okay, great.
Good. So how would you like us to start? Because we've got a presentation that I can put up, but do you want me to share screens? And
Yeah, let's see if, does that work? I'm not sure as an attendee, can you share a screen with us?
Let's see. What do we have for settings?
I am not the one to ask that question to.
No, I cannot. Okay.
Yeah, I think you needed to come in as a panelist.
Yeah, it was actually Rebecca that was invited as the panelist though.
Let's see a second here. Barry, can you help Tim? Maybe we'll go to the Recreation Task Force, and you can give Tim some guidance of how to.
Or I can email it to him.
I think it'd be best if he just emails and goes over it, because I think we gave Rebecca has the email from LCIC regarding being a panelist.
Yep.
So
okay.
You're not going to be able to share a screen. So why don't you just email the council the presentation, just go over the presentation right now since we have you online. And Kathy, I also see that Mr. Van Beek has his hand up as well.
All right.
Yes, I've unmuted him. Bill, you can speak.
No, I just wanted, we weren't sure I was here. I just wanted to let you know I was here, that's all.
Oh, yes. I saw you were here. Thanks,
Okay.
welcome.
Thank you.
All right, so I'll go offline. I'll email this off to, who am I emailing this to?
Who do you want to email to?
Oh, just the presentation so we can pop it up.
I think that's probably, I don't know if that's going to work. I mean,
Okay,
Brian, you can jump in here, but Tim, you can email it. You can email it to us and just talk us through it now, and then we'll read it afterwards. I think the thing that happened, if you'd come in as a panelist, we could have seen it, but I think now
okay.
that's not going to work. The only other alternative would be to have you work with a staff person, and we'll do our other delegation and we come back around. But
Yeah, I think that's it. Didn't Scott suggest that he could send them a Zoom meeting invite as a panelist, and the rec task force could go ahead while they sort that out? I mean, that doesn't take long.
okay, well, that works for me if that works for you guys.
That can work for me.
Okay, staff, are you all right with that?
Sure, yeah, can you just send me email then, so I have your contact info, because I don't have it, at cao@roslyn.ca, and we'll try to get you a participant link for this one.
Okay,
All right,
Okay,
sounds
thanks.
good.
thanks.
Then meanwhile, we will go over to the Rec Task Force and welcome Aaron and Thompson of the Recreational Task Force. And we look forward to your presentation. And thanks for all your hard work on that.
Thanks. Thompson's going to start out. I'm just going to try and share the presentation with you before that happens. Okay. So if I've got it right, you're seeing the presentation, the first slide of the presentation. Is that correct?
Yep, that looks good. Pretty picture.
Oh, that's beautiful. So Thompson, all yours.
All right, thanks, Aaron. Yeah, so Aaron and I do a bit of a tag team, sort of split this up in parts, but just like to thank the Mayor and Council for listening to us. So yeah, this piece is around our findings so far around the swimming pool review. Next slide, Aaron. So context for this is, people will recall, Recreational Task Force was formed last year, 2019. We've been working through a few elements. You can see on the screen the purpose. But essentially, the idea is to provide some additional insights to council regarding the various recreational facilities within the city. Makeup is there. We've extended our term a bit into June, giving me a little more time to accomplish a few things. You would recall we presented some findings around the arena in the fall, I think. This is a discussion on the pool, and we have one more larger item, TRP, which will be forthcoming in the near future. Thanks, Aaron. So a little context around the pool, as many people on the phone will know, been around for a long time, almost 90 years now, as it were. Built in 1932, around the sort of Depression era. A lot of sort of donations, if you will. Land was donated by the city on top of an old swimming hole. Tech, or Cameco at the time, donated some materials, and basically volunteers put the whole thing together in terms of organization and labor. Operationally, it's been, over the various decades, been run by volunteer board and now run by the city or some combination thereof. So been with us for quite a long time. High level, the season is in the summer, of course, June through sort of late August. In terms of our findings, it's used by about 12% of Roslyn population, at least once during that period. And there's a variety of user groups, stingrays, golden bears, school children, but of course a whole bunch of individuals use the pool.
Can I ask a question here? You've got 12% of the Roslyn population using it, and I know that doesn't include golden bear and school children, but does it include stingrays?
I have to check that, Kathy, but I believe it does.
Okay, because my question was really, if you included golden bear kids and school children, what would the percentage be? Is it certainly a lot of kids, but I don't know if they use it once or twice a year. I don't know how often they use it. Thanks.
Yeah, that's in terms of the data we collected, this is sort of 12% at least once. So sometimes there are repeat users in there, repeat individuals, repeat schools. To defer to Aaron, we have to look further into the information we had around that, but it's a little trickier to gather that data than the arena.
Yeah, just to jump in, Thompson's got it right. That figure doesn't include daycare or school visits. It does include stingrays. But we don't have the data on what it would be, including Golden Bear and school children.
Yeah, so on the financial piece, the reason, task force was asked to take a look at that is over the last few years, averages, it is a net cost to the city or net cost to taxpayer, however you describe that. And that's incorporated the revenues less the operating expenses to run the place, about $65,000 a year in terms of financial burden, if you will. And while when you go through the reports, there are some allocations for capital, that's really capital being invested for immediate or non-routine repairs, and it's really not capital being applied to ensure sort of longevity of the asset. So it's really sort of more day-to-day repair. It's just an accounting function. So what we did, we took a look at that context, brainstormed some various options, and came up with basically 3 options for council to consider. One is to deal with the swimming pool itself. A couple of things could be done there. One is over some period of time, phase it out, actually, and close it eventually. The other option is to renovate it, and renovate in this case means really extend the life of the pool as it is for a significant period of time, whether that's 20, 30, 40 years. It wasn't to be changing it particularly, but just to really give it new life, given that it is almost 90 years old. Second piece was around reservoirs or open water options. That's 2 options there, Center Star Gulch and Ophir Reservoirs. Take a look at that. And another option is a spray park or a splash park, depending on how people describe that. And as you can imagine, any of these options could be combined or they could be standalone. Yeah, so in terms of how we went about it, some cases was similar to our methodology around the arena, which is collecting data from as many sources as we could, whether that's documents, user groups, other municipalities. We assembled as much in terms of hard data, hard reports as we could, as we found them. One feature here is, as you'll see as Aaron goes through some of the detail, we didn't really make any attempt to update any of the report figures for 2020. So some are 7 years old, some are 5 years old. We didn't really spend any time on validating or updating those figures, so we took them as is. Somewhat different than the arena approach is we've summarized a number of our key findings and some context around any of the options we could find. But without having enough information, we haven't come through with a firm recommendation on one of those 3 options to pursue. Our recommendation really is towards the end is that council should consider a sort of initial stab at gathering further information to help delineate a path forward. So with that, I will turn it over to Aaron.
Thanks, Thompson. So I'm going to run through the options that Thompson presented and give you what information we do have on them, with the caveats that Thompson has already given us. That is, a lot of the information we don't have, and Thompson will come back at the end and talk about some of that, some of the key information gaps. And the other caveat is that some of the information we do have is questionable, either out of date or we're not sure about the quality of the information. But where that's the case, I'll try to make it clear. So looking at the 2 swimming pool options for starters, you can see here in terms of the financials, the revenue from the existing pool at $40,000, operation and maintenance takes that down to a expenditure of about $73,000 a year in net, with about $5,000 worth of capital invested. As Thompson mentioned, that's not that capital is more patchwork than it is addressing fundamental structural integrity. We don't have, and Thompson will highlight this, we don't have an estimate for how much it would cost to extend the life of this pool, nor are we sure about how long that life is. We have the evaluation conducted in 2013 by ISL. At that time, the structural components seemed to be in good functional state, normal signs of wear and tear. But that is 7 years ago. And even at that time, it was noted that the pool seemed to be, in some senses, coming to the end of its useful life and perhaps needing a major renovation when that happened. This means that the two options look something like this. Option A is if it's decided to phase out the pool, that the pool could be kept open for as long as it can, sort of limping along in its present fashion until some major capital expenditure, some major renovation becomes necessary, at which time it would be closed down. So phasing out does not mean closing immediately. It means status quo until the status quo becomes untenable. Option B would be to renovate, sink enough capital into the thing to make sure there are no unexpected surprises and extend the life of the thing by 20 plus years, bringing it up to code. I should mention that the ISL report noted that there are currently a lot of elements in the building that are not in code, so bringing it up to code would not be cheap. Unfortunately, another one of the unknowns is how much exactly that would cost. The reservoir options, there were, as Thompson mentioned, two potential options. Each would see a swimming and recreation area constructed at either the Center Star Gulch Reservoir or the Ophir Reservoir. We have an existing study on the Center Star Gulch Reservoir conducted by ISL. There is no study, similar study on Ophir, so a lot of the assumptions we made about Ophir are based on the existing study from Center Star. Those may not be applicable, and Thompson's going to highlight that as well. Revenue, we assume that revenue from activities is not going to be much more than necessary to offset operating expenses or operation and maintenance cost. And those activities would be Red Cross lessons, Roslyn Rec activities such as stand-up paddleboarding. I'll go in a little more to what some of those options might be when I come to do a summary of the benefits, loss of services and benefits of the various options. The assumption here when we talk about the costs involved in these facilities is no supervision, no permanent lifeguard on duty, no security offered. So it would be a swim at your own risk type of an operation. It could be done, it was set out in this the feasibility study as two options, a basic or an enhanced. The difference between the two being the enhanced would involve flush toilets and utilities, lights, fencing, paved parking, proper toilets. You can see that the capital expenditure difference between the two is significant, about a little over $500,000. But operating expenses for this particular, for either of these options is assumed to be fairly low. In fact, close to the neighborhood of the of last year's operating expenses for the pool, but much less than the projected operating expenses for the pool going forward. The spray park, there are two basic types of spray park. One would be one where the water flows through the thing and then into the storm sewer system. And the other would be a recirculating system where the water is treated and recirculated within the park. I assume there's no revenues from an operation like this. Operation costs fairly low, lower for the recirculating model than for the flow-through model. These costs, by the way, are from a feasibility study done by the City of Revelstoke in 2015. Initial capital, a fair bit of difference between a flow-through and a recirculating system. So the recirculating system has a higher capital cost, but a lower operating cost. There is, well, we'll talk about the water as a consideration when we come to the next slide. Or not the next slide, the one after that. So regional considerations, obviously we're talking about changing or potentially changing the offerings of recreation facilities. That's got to be set in the context of what there currently is in the region. And we go through this in a fair bit of detail in the report. For outdoor pools, obviously we have Warfields, which is a bus ride away or 6 kilometers. We also have indoor pools at Trail and Castlegar. In terms of open water facilities or substitutes for the reservoirs, we have Gyro, which is fairly close, Nancy Green, Millennium Park in Castlegar. A little bit further away than those three, we have Champion Lakes, Arrow Lake, Syringa, and further away yet, we have Christina Lake. These are all comparable water-based facilities, but progressively further away and progressively less accessible as alternatives to Roslyn facility. And in terms of substitutes for a spray park within the region, of course, we have Gyro Park. We also have one in Warfield and one in Montrose. All fairly accessible, but not in town, of course. So I want to talk just a little bit about what each of these would involve in terms of gains or losses of service to Roslyn residents. Because we've talked about the financials, but we haven't talked about what you get for the financials. In the case of the swimming pool, if we follow the phase-out option for the swimming pool, the major impact falls on those current users, that 12% that Thompson mentioned, most heavily probably on kids and adults that do swimming. Here you see probably a disproportionate impact on those independent youth that could walk to the pool but don't have a car and would need to take a bus if they went to Warfield. The loss of that pool, or the sale of that pool, or the demolition of that pool, we go through the various options, would give us some development opportunity on Columbia Avenue with that land, of course. It's worth considering that there's a great deal of emotional attachment to that pool, given its history of volunteerism, given that many families have grown up with their kids or possibly themselves swimming there as young kids. That is not to be taken lightly. The reservoirs, if it was considered, it may seem like a reservoir would be a substitute for a pool in Roslyn. In some senses it is. You could offer Red Cross lessons there. It could be a swimming facility, but it's actually a different offering, and we make that clear in the report. There wouldn't be supervision, so you could not drop your kids off or let your kids go there independently. We are talking about colder water. Even though the seasons are longer, this would probably see a drop-off in the uptake of Red Cross lessons. But you're also talking about new opportunities for recreational activities, including some of the ones listed here: paddle sports, open water swimming, triathlon, stand-up paddleboarding, dragon boating, a number of activities that could be just user-free or offered through the Roslyn Rec Department. A couple of the considerations to take in mind when you're thinking about the reservoirs as a facility for Roslyn: whichever reservoir the city might decide to use as a swimming area would have to be taken offline for drinking water from the city. And of course, there would be probably public concern about the idea of swimming in what might potentially be a drinking water supply, even if it was taken offline. Spray park, would probably be an easily accessible option for families with small children. Again, if the city was thinking about this as a potential replacement for a swimming pool, it's a different facility. It would have quite a different user group. We're talking about small kids. It would see a similar function in terms of summer hot weather recreation for those kids, but of course, quite a different offering. Another consideration for this one is what happens to the water and how much water it uses. We're not sure how much water the current pool uses, but the city would want to compare how much that is, because it's not metered, we don't know. The city would want to compare how much that is to how much spray park would use. Obviously, if it's a recirculating model, it doesn't use much, but if it's a flow through, it does. Another consideration is if it's a flow through, you're dumping water into the storm sewer system. If that's treated water, then that's a concern. Finally, a consideration for all three of these options is that if the city was looking for funding to pursue any of them, there's, and this is no news to any of you, there's probably more available funding for new infrastructure, much less so for renovations to existing infrastructure or expansion to existing infrastructure. So I'm going to hand this back to Thompson now to talk about some of the key information gaps that we've been harping on about. Thompson, over to you.
All right, thanks, Aaron. Yeah, that's really our last piece before questions. So yeah, there's a few pieces of information that were really fundamental and missing in order to, advance any one of the options that Aaron described. The key is that investment required to what would it need to bring the pool up to sort of a 20, 30 plus year life The only reference we did have was an old study, but that reference was really for a big new indoor facility, which we thought was not a useful benchmark. So we would recommend a study specific to the Rosslyn pool in terms of, say, longevity. The other piece around the pool, again, depending on options to add some more color to it, would be what is the minimum requirement to say to mothball that facility, considering really protecting the public safety and whatever would be needed to prepare for development path, depending which way the city was thinking of going. So those two pieces around the pool we really did find was a gap in information, which could be achieved. Second piece was around the reservoirs. In the report, you'll find, I guess, somewhat of a high-level comparison between those two options, Center Star Gulch and Beaufort. We think the next piece would be to do an in-depth sort of side-by-side comparison of the pluses and minuses of each of those options when you consider sort of technical features, user access, etc. And at this time, we didn't think you actually needed to get an engineering study done or spend a lot of money to get that done, but a certain group or gathering could do a side-by-side comparison. And then the last piece around the spray park, which can be done, I think, relatively easily, would be to understand the water consumption, water capacity issues, drainage issues, as Aaron highlighted around that option. And that can be done by referencing other people that use spray parks, but just to get a sense of what would be the city's approach to water conservation or water consumption. And so, yeah, these are the pieces that we thought really would need to be done to advance any further thinking around the various options. And depending on what would be found after gathering these pieces of information, there might be another phase of information gathering if the number of options were fine-tuned down to just one or two. So with that, I think we'll just leave it and certainly open the floor to questions for Aaron or myself.
I think I'm unmuted now, hopefully. Thank you, Aaron and Thompson. That was great. And the report from the task force was very good. So we appreciate all the effort that all of you volunteers put into that. I'm going to open it up to council to see if anyone has any questions. And I see Dirk has his hand up. Go ahead, Dirk.
Did you unmute me? Okay.
Yeah.
Just about I'm a bit confused about the IHA recommendation to take it offline during swimming. If we swam up at the gulch, does that take it out of the drinking water permanently or just while people are swimming? Is that...
So the recommendation, and actually Darren's probably better to comment on this than I am, but the recommendation as I understood it was as long as it's designated a swimming area, so for the entire season, you could not have an intake that fed into the city municipal water supply. And as I understand it, it's not a matter of saying, okay, stop swimming in there and now we can put it in because we need that water. You have to have it offline as a feed into the city water treatment plant. But Darren probably can add more context on that.
Yeah, with the discussions that we've had in the past with IHA, Aaron, you're right. It's it's being used until the water test can come back to a satisfactory, depending on exactly what we're testing for. Once it comes back to meet the requirements of drinking water, then it could be put back online. But not during the swim season for sure. Matter of fact, there's other testing that needs to be done daily, weekly, when it does become a facility that we're encouraging people to swim in.
But it's not irrevocable. If we decided we wanted to use it for swimming for 5 years and then suddenly climate change comes along or water shortages, we could switch it back and have it be swimming after going through the proper procedures.
Yes, of course it could be. It could even be put back on in the fall once the testing had been completed.
Okay, thanks. Chris, what's your question there?
Darren, did you say that there has to be some upgrades done to make it able to be swimmable as far as the water or some testing goes?
So what needs to be done is, unfortunately, our inlet and our outlet are on the same end of the reservoir, so they're all on the north end of the reservoir. So we would need to bring the intake down further towards the water treatment plant, so you get fresh water running through the reservoir if we're going to turn it into a swimming hole.
Okay, does anyone else have questions? Andy has a question. Go ahead, Andy.
Regarding the firefighting capability, my big concern with utilizing Star Gulch as a swimming hole would be that it would take it out of it would make it accessible for firefighting, but that would limit what extra water we would have with the other obviously with the other reservoir. So if in the case of a forest fire or a large infrastructure fire that was in town, we could potentially be in a real shortage as far as access to water, and that would be a substantial concern for me. I have no idea what kind of capacity a major fire would require, but one of the main reasons, or certainly one of the reasons that we built the second reservoir was a concern for firefighting capacity. So I think that's something that definitely want to keep that in mind when making a decision.
Darren, do you have a comment on that?
Yeah, the only comment that I have there is, if there was ever such an incident in town where say if we're using over a reservoir, we would just have to go to an automatic boil water advisory and then start pulling from Star Gulch.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, Council? So we're going to take all these reports and presentations. I know there's lots of things that would be for Council to discuss, and then get staff to look at before we make further progress on this issue. But thank you very much. We'll dismiss that delegation unless I don't see any other hands up. Okay, thank you guys. Oh, Darren.
Yeah, one comment, Aaron, is you indicated that there was not a water meter on the pool, so we didn't know our usage there, but we do. So I can get that for you if that makes any difference in your findings.
Yeah, that would be great, because obviously the concern with if the city was talking about a recirculating spray park, you'd want to know how the use of something like, a flow-through spray park, you'd want to know how the use of something like that compared to the current use of the pool, precisely because you'd be worried about water capacity problems of the type that Andy talked about, and also your peak days of summer use. So yeah,
I'm going to just jump in here and apologize to Aaron and Thompson on that one. That was asked of me right before my spring vacation, and I said we didn't. So my apologies. I gave some bad information to them there.
that's balanced out by the fact that Christy gave us so much good information. So I think that's
it's more than balanced out. Okay, all right. Thanks you guys very much. And Council will be looking at this, and we'll have some discussion and some direction to staff of more things that we want to see and investigate based on your good work. So thank you so much. Okay, I'm going to go back. Oh, sorry.
Thanks for listening.
Okay, thanks. All right, I'm going to go back to the Lower Columbia Initiatives Corporation gentlemen, and I see Tim is now a panelist. So Tim, you can start in. Tim, are you there? Can you speak?
Tim. There we go. Am I good now?
Yes.
Can you hear me? Good.
You're still pretty soft-spoken.
No?
Okay, no, that's good.
All right. You'd think I'd have this figured out. I've been in meetings in the last 3 weeks.
Your voice is really cutting out.
Is this better now?
Yep.
Okay. I'll just have to hold my microphone better. Awesome. So I've got Bill Van Beek and West Startup here as well. So I will share the screen and then we can get started. There we go. So you can start us off, Bill, and walk us through the LCC DTS and how that relates with the LCI, and then we'll have Wes talk a little bit about the historical events for LCI, and then I can finish it up with what we are currently undertaking.
All right, can I get the next screen, please? So I think most of you have known the LCC ETS. We've been around for a while. There's 50 or more volunteers from different sectors and organizations in the Lower Columbia. And what we're working to do is improve the quality of life and social wellness by expanding housing options, enriching arts, and undertaking community initiatives. So what are we doing currently? Can I get the next slide, please? So we have the Untitled Housing Committee, and right now they're putting up a 9-plex with BC Housing and Trail. I think the Roslyn project is proceeding fairly steadily. I'm not sure of the current status, but I know they're working hard with City of Roslyn on that one. And we're also working on having a supportive housing unit in Trail, and that's working with BC Housing. And that's sort of taken a bit of a backseat due to the current corona crisis with the BC Housing, but that's still something that we're looking at and working forward to. With the energy and sustainability, we did have the conference with, or the seminar with David Suzuki. That was planned for May 1st, and we've rescheduled for next year. It was just too close and too much uncertainty, so we're now looking at that for next year. We'll be looking at a number of other sustainability events in the coming year. And the Health and Hospital, still working hard with the Health and Hospital on doctor recruiting, but also looking at the possibility of a community health center. So there's a committee working with Division of Family Practice, looking at that option and see what it means for not only Trail, but in the longer term, Roslyn and Fruitvale as well. And the Metallurgical Committee is working on a map of the available opportunities in the area, trying to link people together. And the Tourism and Columbia River Committee are working together, and they're looking at the Beaver Creek Park. BC Parks is now going to reestablish that as a provincial park with upgrades, which I think will be great for the area, and seeing that park better recognized and used. It's such a lovely location right on the river. Nothing on the Transportation Committee at this time. And sustainable local agriculture, the Trails Farmers Market is going ahead. They have got approval. They are considered an essential service. Exactly what it's going to look like, we'll have to see, because they're going to have to change substantially. It'll only be for food products. There will be no crafts or any vendors of that nature. And they will be having their food coupon program going as well, which will be good for local agriculture and for those that are in need. And the other one that's not there is we're looking right now as to what the role will be looking forward when we get back to some sort of normalcy, and seeing what that will look like. So I think that's going to be the other big one. And I know working with the LCIC and other community groups to see how we can all work together to help get back on the road when we're given that opportunity. So that's a summary of the LCC DTS today.
All right. Thank you, Bill. Wes, are you available? Did Wes come back on?
I've permitted him to speak. He's one of the attendees. He's not one of the panelists.
Oh,
Wes,
okay.
Wes?
Are you able to hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I think one of the main things that we've been working on this year has been the circular economy, and we hosted the National Industrial Symbiotic Program a couple times in the fall. And so this is really a key part of our business retention, expansion, and attraction piece. We have very strong board members from across the communities in our area. And we're going to be working quite hard on moving forward with that circular economy piece. And I'm quite pleased to announce that we're going to be welcoming a new board member who is Pete Stamper, and he is the general manager at Casey Recycling. So that'll fit really nicely in with that circular economy piece. The next slide, please. Our Metal Tech Alley play is still going quite strongly. We have made some good strides. I went down to this I4C site today on my bicycle for a spin, and I note that there's been a lot of remedial work being done there for the industrial lands, and so I'm anticipating those will be coming back on the market fairly soon, and that will be a big asset for our area to have that lands available again for market. We have really made great strides with our branding in conjunction with our Metal Tech Alley play, and we see that as a, I guess, as a new way to tell our story for this region, and we're getting a lot of traction on that piece. Next slide. So I think, Tim, this is where you can take over.
Sure. Can everybody hear me? I can use my soccer dad voice if I have to. So just quickly, just some of the stats around Metal Tech Alley, and since it's its inception, and some of the really great things that are happening around the region because of it. I was actually on the phone today, and somebody was talking. He worked with a company in Africa that actually had heard about Metal Tech Alley and our circular economy piece all the way down in Africa. So one of the things that we really need to do is really retell that story here in the valley. We've gotten some great traction outside of here, but we really need to tell that story at home so that we can really ingrain that and sell it as this is more than just a little Kootenay region that has one or two things. This region has got a lot to offer, and one of the highlights this year right now is at I4C with their Digital Water Commons project. Not just for the amount of grant money that they've been able to bring in for that, which is over $5 million, but the capacity that that's going to build in the region. All the sensors that they're putting into the basin are going to be built here in the Kootenays, as well as it will serve to give us information on not just water quality, but also how much more industry this valley can sustain with the amount of water that we have coming through. So it's a really good, incredible project that's going on that'll give us some data to really help world-class data around what the capacity is for this valley as well. And the last thing is our Industrial Circular Economy Conference. We postponed it from June because of this wonderful COVID issue. And we've pushed it over to September. We'll make a final decision in June as to whether or not, depending on how travel restrictions go and how the world is coping with this, with the pandemic, as to whether or not we keep it on this year or push it into next year. I would love to keep it this year for a couple of reasons. It's a big piece of our sustainability to transition from just talking about gaps in our supply chain that's right here in the valley into a more circular economy, and bringing the world down to trail to experience not just the Kootenays, but the kind of expertise that we have here in the valley, as well as from our calculations, it's going to be approximately over $500,000 over the 3 days that's going to be spent here in the valley because of this conference. So that's another big reason that we want to keep it on, because after this COVID thing, a good shot in the arm like that is good for the local economy. So talking about COVID, one of the things that we're doing currently is we have collaborated with Community Futures and the Trail and District Chamber to put on a virtual roundtable every week to help reconnect businesses, get them connected with supports and information that they'll need to help sustain themselves through this time, as well as it gives the community a chance to really connect and talk about the issues that are out there. And that way it positions us better to be able to respond and build some programming to be able to support those businesses as we take a look at getting through this and into the rebound and restart up of the economy here. And just on that note, a couple of things that we're looking at as well is some of our board members are working diligently at building out some projects, knowing that there's probably going to be some public works money, some money going into the economy for startup. So we want to have some projects ready to go, and one of those is looking at the recreational trails around here. For a couple reasons. We can get a lot of people who would not normally have their seasonal jobs, get them jobs working on the trail system, which is paychecks in people's hands, and then we get a lasting legacy of recreational trails that we get to use for years to come. So it checks off a lot of boxes. One of the other things we're looking at putting forward as well, in conjunction with Community Futures and the Trail Chamber, is taking a look at, while we're still in this pandemic and in the self-isolation, is putting together another roundtable for business owners around mental health issues and just having them be able to talk about some of the issues that they're going through. It's just not hard on the workers, it's even harder on some of the business owners who are really invested, not just with their money, but with their emotions and stuff into their businesses. So we want to make sure that we're out there supporting them. So a couple of things that we had going that we wanted to continue on with as well, is just, you know, these slides are just about the way we want to work with our community very collaboratively and work closely with them to be able to identify their needs, both for the businesses and the region as well. And be able to provide that assistance either directly facilitated or be the advocates for it. And as we move forward, that's going to be primary in what we do locally, is to work with that business community in that way. Some of the things that we're going to be doing over this summer is we're bringing on a couple summer students. One is to redo our database of industrial lands, so that's good that they're doing the work around those, to bring that back on. And then because that's a big part of our marketing as well. And then also to talk to our stakeholders about being investment ready and what that means. And we walk through, we'll be working through that as well. And that's a part of that sustainability thing, sustainability piece that we were working through with Lee Malo on the Metal Tech Alley, is to take a look at what investment readiness is. Once we get through this initial crisis, we'll be working through that as well. So yeah, so those are just some of the highlights that we have going on. Just want to be very clear that within our region, we are working really closely and collaboratively with all of our partners on the ground. So that's Community Futures and the Trail Chamber, and then really extending out towards our stakeholders and listening and really building that relationship so that we can support a sustained development across the region. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tim. That was great. Council, do you have any questions? Andy, you have put your hand up.
Thanks for the presentation. Really pleased to hear that you're reaching out to our local business community right now. I think that's really critical. As I know, forward thinking as LCIC and LCCDTS has been, you know, the situation that we are experiencing right now is critical to our business community. And I'm really hoping that that's where the efforts and initiatives are going currently. And I'm not sure if all businesses are being reached out to. I'm not sure that you know, how whether it's a membership driven or such. I'm just concerned that there's lots of business people, especially when you think of it too. There's an awful lot of home business folks right now who are probably hurting as well. So just like to know that that your organization, along with the other business, the Trail, Chamber of Commerce, et cetera, are really right now making every effort to reach out to these people. I think, you know, just the fact that the pandemic is so critical to our community right now, I think it's really important. And I hope that is your kind of number one responsibility and goal right at the moment.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for that. It is definitely our number one thing that we're concerned about. We want to make sure that there is a business community here left after this pandemic. And as for making sure that we reach out to everybody, between the three organizations, our mailing lists, and then our Facebook, we are trying to reach as many people as we can. And so if you notice and you see stuff, feel free to share it across your networks as well. The more the merrier. One of the lucky things that this has happened with this is a lot of our political leaders in the region have been jumping on and not just participating, but taking the time to sit and just listen to what our communities are saying. So they're getting direct input into government planning and thoughts around that. And you know, crisis always builds good relationships. There's opportunity in crisis, and we're taking this opportunity to really build those relationships with the decision makers in this, and show them what it is that we can do and what we want to have happen for this region.
Yeah, I thought that was very helpful that one of the meetings the MLA was there, and one of the meetings the MP was there, and you know the RCMP has been there. They've been well attended, and they've been quite informative. So thank you for that, along with your other partners. I had one quick question. You're talking about the South Kootenai Trails development kind of thing. Are you guys working with KCTS on that?
Yes, it is our board member Dave Diplock, who's also part of their board.
Say no more. Say no more. We got
so
it.
Yeah, not only is he working with the local trails, it's a regional effort, as well as he's even in talking with our Indigenous neighbors as well, and making sure that they're involved in it as well. So
okay, thank you. So does anyone else have any other questions for LCIC? If not, I'm going to thank you, and we're going to move on to the next aspect of our agenda. Looks good. Thanks a lot, Tim.
Thank
and
you
Wes and Bill.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye. Okay, so I need a motion to adopt the minutes of the regular meeting held on April 6th. Do I have a hand up somewhere? Okay, I see Janice and I see Dirk. Any comments or changes to these minutes? I see none. All in favor, raise your hands. Or I guess if you're opposed, call out, because I really don't see everybody. Okay, so as I recall, we didn't really have any recommendations from our committee of the whole, so we're going to skip that part. We'll move on to policies and bylaws. First up is a review of the land transaction policy, and the motion is that we reconfirm it. Can I have a mover? And okay, we'll see Chris and Janice. And any discussion here? If you guys want to use your little hand raising thing, is easier because I can't see everybody on the picture. So if anybody wants to do that, if anybody has any comments. Okay, I see hands going, but nobody actually wanting to speak. Is that right? Okay, so all in favor and raise your hands. Yeah, there we go. Okay. All right. Anyone opposed? Stuart, are you opposed? I don't think so. Okay. Well, it's a little awkward, but I think we're doing it. Okay. Policy review of pesticide and herbicide use policy. This is that we reconfirm this pesticide use policy. I recall, I think last year we were talking about wanting to actually create a bylaw about this to be put a little more teeth in it, which would be a different thing than this policy. And I know right now probably isn't the time to create a new bylaw on this particularly. So let's just look at reconfirming this one. Do I have a mover? Dirk moves it, and I don't see another hand. Janice, because I can see Janice. Okay. Okay, any discussion on this? Dirk, you have anything to say since you're the mover? Yes?
No, just with reference to the, we had talked about a bylaw for cosmetic pesticides.
Yeah.
And I've read a bunch and I'm still reading, but it's one of those nearly impossible to enforce things. So still looking at some options.
Okay. All right. Well, good. Any other comments?
Kathy, I'd like to ask that since we're reconfirming this current bylaw, it'd be great to get the word out that we're doing a reconfirmation. It's spring. Lots of folks are going to be looking for, some folks, hopefully not lots, are going to be looking for hiring commercial lawn keeper to come in and fertilize and weed kill. So I think it just good to reconfirm, get the public know that we do have some bylaw in place, and that whether we want to mention we're looking to strengthen it, I don't know if that's necessary,
Yeah.
but certainly letting folks know now.
That we do have the policy, that we're reconfirming our policy. Yeah, we can do that. I'm working on a newsletter that'll go out after this meeting, so it can. I think I had it. I was going to have it in there as something we were reconfirming, but I'll look at that. Okay, all in favor? Or I'm just going to go the other way. Anyone who's not in favor, call out. Otherwise, it's going to be good to go. Okay, is there anyone not in favor? All right, that one goes. Okay, now we have a policy review, our recreation facility user allocation policy, and this also that we reconfirm this. Do I have a mover? Janice moves it. Do I have a seconder? Chris seconds. Janice, discussion?
Nothing, thank you.
Okay, Chris? Anything? No? Okay, I don't see any other hands up. I see this nice list of people and no hands up. So I'm going to say anybody opposed. If you're opposed, put your little hand up on there. And if not, we're good to go. Okay, next we have, this is our City of Roslyn Financial Plan 2020-2024 Bylaw 2722. And this is that we read it a second and third time as amended. Yeah, okay, so do we have a mover? Okay, Janice moves it. Again, I can only see Janice. You're going to be the one. You other guys, if you want to put your little hand up in there, you can do that, and then I can see you, because otherwise I'm going to have to go like all these other places. I can, okay. Okay, so a seconder? Somebody be a seconder? Scanning. Okay, Andy's a seconder. Okay. Do we have any comments and questions that anybody wants to make? And put your hands up there. Stuart's got one. Yay, and thank you for using your hand. Stuart, go ahead. Where are you, Stuart? Can't hear you.
I don't actually have one. That's just the delay when I was offering to second the motion.
Oh man, that was a real delay because it really didn't come up until.
Sorry for the disappointment.
Okay.
I would defer my movement to you if you'd like, Stuart.
Otherwise, it's going to be the Janice show. Okay, maybe I'll change my screen and I won't have Janice right there, and then maybe somebody else will put their hands up. Now I'm looking at Stuart and Andy. You guys are in my screen, so you can be the ones to raise your hands next time. Okay, so we do have our financial plan. We do know there are going to be some things that we might not be spending money on, even though it's in the plan. And so, like our council conference budget may really change if we don't go to UBCM, right? So there are going to be some things that we may end up moving money around for some other worthy purpose, should we so find one. Okay, I'm going to call the question. Is there anyone?
Can I just make a short question? I presume staff are going to be keeping a tally of any of these savings that we're making.
Yeah,
for sure.
And then if and when we have some appropriate response we need to make, we'll be able to refer to staff and understand where our position is.
Yeah, a good time to do that was when I present the quarterly updates.
Yep.
Great. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so any other comments, or I'm going to call the question. Oh, wait, Dirk, is your hand up? Or are you voting?
No,
Dirk.
my hand's up.
Okay, good, thank you.
Where is it appropriate that we talk about, we had 1,000 or 2,000 emails today about plans or savings or helpful, to Stu's point that a potential targeted help for people that need it. I mean, where is it appropriate for us to discuss that, here or somewhere else?
I think we could discuss it. We could discuss it here because this is where we may see some of those savings, or we could discuss it in probably members' reports because we don't know what the exact savings are. I mean, if you just want to discuss ideas, ideas about a fund of some sort, is that what you're thinking?
My head's still trying to accommodate all of the emails that came back and forth, and I'm keen to have a fulsome discussion at some point.
Why don't we do it? Why don't we get through the agenda, because I don't think there's anything that we're going to talk about that's actually going to change anything we're doing right now. So why don't we do it when we get to members' reports? Is that all right? I'm going to ask staff, would that be the appropriate spot, do you think, given that we're talking about a discussion about helpful things we can do for the community?
Yeah, so I think as a recommendation is that the financial plan is kind of its own beast right now in regards to taxation and the programs and the services that we're looking at and the capital projects that we're working on. And back to Councillor Spooner's response there, or information there, is that once we know, for example, if for some reason we do not operate the pool this year, then we know that we have a $45,000 savings in taxation or whatever that number is that went into the pools, and we can kind of start tallying this stuff up. And then in our quarterly reports, we'll be able to sit down and really link what the savings are in regards to the operational activities based on the approved budget. And I know there was also a discussion in regards to property taxation, deferments in regards to penalties, and that's kind of also a separate issue, and it's related to the financial plan, but it would be a separate bylaw that is done. And so if we can get through the bylaw to make sure this is what our plan is still in place for the 2020 budget, then we can also have a further discussion in regards to other activities that would be able to be advanced by council to do things that you might be looking at trying to do in regards to COVID-19 specific related items. Does that make sense?
Okay, so are you thinking the best time to do that would be when we get towards I mean, we don't have it on the agenda as that. I mean, I'd originally thought we were going to talk about it, that we'd have some recommendations come out of our committee of the whole, and we didn't. So I was thinking we'd talk about it there.
Yeah, we also kind of ran out of time at our committee of the whole meeting though, too, as well. So I think if we were to approve this now, or not approve, but to get second and third reading and continue on the course, if council's satisfied with the 2.5% increase and the current game plan that has been presented by staff, then in the members report we can talk about if there's other specific things that you might want council or staff to look at that we can kind of bring forward in appropriate fashion.
Okay, that works for me. Dirk, does that work for you?
I think it does. I think it just kind of strikes me though that this 5-year plan was developed and maybe tweaked a bit now, but as if we were going business as usual. And it's, as for all the households here, it's for the city, it's not business as usual. And not even just the optics, but having some considerations in this that is definitely not business as usual strikes me that should be here with this part of the conversation.
Well, yes, but I think one of the things, or sort of what we've been talking about, is that we are going ahead with the plan as is, with the understanding that we're going to have we're potentially going to have some savings, and then how we allocate those savings. Like, let's use the pool for an example. If we don't open the pool this year and we have $45,000 worth of savings, when we're looking at that money, we can decide what we want to do with that money. Do we want to invest it in the pool, for instance, making it, or do we want to do something else with it that we haven't, in all of our conversations, we haven't come up with anything that sort of struck the group as something that's targeted enough to help the people who need it. And by passing our financial plan as it is now, that doesn't prohibit us from doing that. It just gets this plan on down the road, right? Then if there's savings places, we can decide later what we want to do with those savings, either reinvest them into wherever we saved them. Like, let's say we don't spend our conference budget this year and we go to 5 conferences next year. Not that we're going to do that, but I'm just saying we'll have the choice to do that. I think unless you want to go back and reconsider the increase that we put in there, the 2.5% increase, which then goes back to our conversation when we gave first reading to this bylaw, which was that by going to a 0% increase, we're not really doing a targeted benefit to anyone, and we're probably harming, a lot of the things that the municipality wants to continue to do as we provide services to our community. So where I thought we'd kind of gotten to, as we had talked around this before, is that we were agreed that we would do the 2.5% increase. We would look for those savings based on what we don't go forward with due to COVID. And then we'll figure out what the best thing to do is with those things. Okay, now I see lots of hands up, and I don't know who came first, but it might have been Stuart. Was it Stuart?
Yes, it was me. I just wanted to say, yes, that's certainly my understanding, Kathy, is that we haven't come up with any clear sort of consensus around what we can do to help people, and there's so much uncertainty about how long this is going to last and who exactly is being affected and how we can help them. These things may become obvious, but I haven't seen any suggestions or considered any suggestions that really do address any of these things. So with all that uncertainty, I think we can only move forward with what we know, which is what we're doing. And then as more information comes to light around any of those uncertainties, we can respond accordingly.
Okay, thanks, Stuart. Janice.
Yeah, I was just going to say, even though it's our 5-year plan, I mean, we review it every year, so we don't know what next year will look like. We're not certain we'll have savings. We could have additional costs. But if we do have savings, there always seems to be something emerging. And I would say that passing the plan as we have it now isn't going to stop our conversation about what we might be able to do to help people who find themselves in financial straits in the next 3 to 6 months within our community.
Yeah, I agree with that. Dirk, your hand is up.
It is, and I think part of this for me is not making it a 0 tax increase, leaving it at 2.5%, but the difference between what it feels like we're doing is passively looking for savings. So if COVID restricts our use of the pool, that's a savings, but it's not something that we have been active in pursuing. And I think I like the idea of that. I can't remember, Elma had a good name for it, but the sort of that resiliency fund or some sort of fund. But if we could derive some of that from an active approach to saving, if we look for things that we don't need to do, or we can maybe defer to help out with, if we have a whole bunch of people that are late in paying, we don't have to dig into reserves so much if we're deferring some of our costs that we can. I don't know.
Okay, I'll let staff make a comment on that. I mean, one thing, I mean, if we wanted to, we could make a motion to direct staff to look for whatever savings they can. Although honestly, I think they do that without being directed. But staff, you want to comment on Dirk's points?
Yeah, just real quick is that we don't know what COVID-19, like post-COVID-19 operations look like. So to sit down and say that we're going to have a savings in the pool of X amount of dollars and we're not going to be able to open the arena until November, and we're going to save $60,000 here, and we're not doing this, we're not doing that. We don't know what the total impact is of post-COVID-19 getting back to quote unquote normal activities of the city would be. So, you know, obviously there's a couple things right now we can take off the lookout right now and say, yeah, if we haven't hired summer students and we're not hiring temporary workers, and there's a cost savings on those kind of things, that's a tally that we can kind of consider and start kind of putting in towards information for the future to sit down and say, here's where we are, we're a little bit further down the road. Here are some of the cost savings that we have seen in regards to operations of the city. And by the way, council, is there something that you might be interested in looking at a resilience fund or putting more money into the community grant program that is happening right now, so people can apply to that for organizations that might need additional funding or something along those lines. So I think it's good to, sorry, our TV's gonna die here. I think it's good for us to have a conversation about that, but I think it's also still just a little bit premature in regards to dictating X is going to equal Y, because we don't really know what that scope looks like right now.
Well, I think that's a really good point. And I think one thing that would probably make all of council feel good is if one of the things that staff does is start to make this list of savings and put dollar figures to things as they come up, so we can kind of see how that's going. Like, you know, like the AKBLG budget, you know, have a little piece, a little report that says, yeah, well, we didn't do that, so here's the savings on that, or maybe there were staff conferences that got canceled as well that some employees didn't go to or something there, just so we can see where those savings are. We may want to use the money for those exact same things and just put it off for a year or whatever, but it would be something to know. Okay, Janice has her hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to actually mention the AKGLB. I mean, that's a great example of we had that money set aside in our budget to go to a conference where we would learn and try and promote and advocate for our community through higher levels of government, which we weren't able to do. But I think that we made a great choice in supporting the chamber with it to help our businesses through this tough time and make sure our businesses have a little bit more advocacy and support. And if we can do things like that, they may not all be home runs, but we're always going to find, you know, we may not be able to go to UBCM either, or any other number of things. So we are going to have, those are in the future, as Brian says. We don't know what they'll be right now, so it's hard to say we have X.
Yeah, I think that's good. Okay, so Dirk, I want to go back to you because you had the most concerns in this. Do you feel like from this discussion comfortable enough that we can move on and vote on the second and third reading of the financial plan?
I mean, I feel like it's a good start, but to Brian's point, we don't know what it's going to look like in 2, 3, 4 months. And my preference would be to be more prepared than we need to be 2, 3, 4 months down the road. I mean, we could open up in a month and everything would go back to fine, or we could be in August and still closed and wishing like heck we'd not bought another car or something. Right? So I think it's, you know, rather than the AKBLG budget, things that could be deferred, something that we've been planning for 2 to 3 years, it would be nice to have an idea of good things for the city, but not deal breakers or uber necessities, so that we're ready come September when, you know, kids are still not going back to school and we've got all kinds of issues.
Well, how about if, okay, wait, Stuart's got his hand up. Go ahead. Stuart, you're muted.
Yeah, I wanted to suggest that it's probably easier. We don't know what our financial position is, you know, up or down, but it's probably easier to defer purchases than it is to raise more taxes, depending on what position we find ourselves in.
So we could put a motion forward to ask staff to, we'll go ahead with our plan here, but ask staff to look at it and sort of say, what's plan B? What things, if we needed to defer, what things could we defer and still not harm our overall, you know, overall health of our municipality and our community? So that would be an idea. And then they could come back with a list of saying, yeah, okay, we were going to buy this pickup truck and now we're not, which suits me just fine because it won't be an EV. So does anyone want to, staff wants to comment on that, or council, somebody in council make a motion?
Yeah, they have a motion on the table. I would just reiterate that the fact is that talking about the money that we would be able to put towards something else is based on the fact that we have an approved budget on the table.
And so once we approve the budget, then we can kind of go and sit down and say, this was in the budget, but due to operational activities, maybe it's worthwhile not pursuing this time, or we can cut the paving program by 50% if we have to, because we're getting to a point where we're not gonna have any money, whatever the case may be. Like, that's a lot of stuff that we can look at doing, but it comes forward after we have some semblance of what a budget actually looks like for 2020, which is basically what's on the table right now.
Right, okay. Okay, so I'm gonna call the question on second and third reading of the financial plan, unless there's any further discussion. All in favor? I'm hoping you're saying yes, and I can see 4. If you're opposed, speak up. Okay, we move that forward. And you know, we've got this, as Brian says, we can go back and look at things, and we can amend it, right? It's not, this is not set in stone, but we do need to keep moving. And with that, let's move on to the municipal tax rate bylaw 2724 of 2020. And this is for first, second, and third reading. Do we have a mover? Janice moves it. Chris, I can see you. Do you want to be the seconder? Chris is the seconder. Good. Okay. How about comments and questions? Janice, anything?
I don't have any comments. Thank you for your hard work, Elma.
Yeah, for sure. What a great day.
Yeah. Anybody else? I don't see any hands up. I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Raise your hand, and I can't see it. You got to do the little doohickey. Okay, that carries. Red Mountain Specified Area Bylaw 2725, that we read this a first, second, and third time. Do I have a mover? Let's see. I can see Stuart. I can see. Okay, I see Dirk and I see Janice. Okay, any comments or questions? It's just adjusted to meet the obligations of the note here. Kind of a no, not a controversial one. All in favor? Raise hands. Good. Anyone opposed? Put up your little hand. Okay. Okay, now we're to the Ophir Reservoir Local Area Service Parcel Tax Bylaw 2726. This is also first, second, and third reading. Who's going to move it? I can see. Okay, I can see Chris. All right, and Dirk. Okay, any comments? Questions, anything? Elma, remind me when this one's to be retired.
2032.
That's the big one. Okay, the other one is, okay. Is the Red Mountain one retiring in 2022?
That's correct.
Okay, and this one 2032?
That's correct.
Okay, good. Let me make sure I got my digits right. Okay, now we're moving on to checkout bag regulation 2723. This is first, second, and third reading. And I would add and further that it be sent to the Minister of Environment for approval, because that's going to take some time and not going to be enacted anytime soon. Okay, Andy moves it, and a seconder, Dirk. Okay, any discussion? Okay, nobody? Okay, all in favor? Okay, and no one opposed. I did want to say the minister did not specifically say provisional regulations would be put in place right when COVID was done. So, but the ministry was encouraging municipalities to submit their own at this time. So I think it makes, it makes sense. I think, as far as I know, Cynthia, this is a question for you. In this new version, there's no other changes other than to say it's being forwarded to the ministry, right? Okay, good. Okay, and that passed. Staff reports. Now we are to the Flux Climbing rental agreement, and staff is looking for further direction. We have closed the building and they have no income, but they still owe us rent. What would we like to do? Dirk.
I think Stu beat me to the punch with his little blue hand.
Oh, sorry. Let's let Stu go forward, because I want to reward him for putting his hand up instead of me trying to figure out who's saying. Stu, go ahead.
Well, I was just listening to guidance from our provincial government on this matter, and I guess they described that tenants should discuss this and negotiate fair terms with their landlord. But there is also a federal Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance that provides forgivable loans for these very issues. So, I sort of trying to read what is appropriate under those circumstances. It seemed to me something in the range of a 50% reduction that we would do our part, and that they could take advantage of perhaps of a federal program for the other part. That's where my mind was going. My only other thought was what would happen when they were allowed to open at some reduced capacity. Do we go back to a full rent, or do we have some sort of sliding scale? But I wasn't really clear how that would work. It seemed sort of complicated. But that's anyway, that's where my thoughts are going.
Good point. I don't know exactly the details of that rent assistance program, whether they would qualify. Does anybody on staff happen to know that, or anybody on council have read up on it?
We're not sure.
I mean, I read, and it seemed that anyone that's paying commercial rent was able to apply for a forgivable loan backdated to the start of COVID. I don't know if the details have actually been worked out with a lot of these programs, but it seemed to apply to anybody that was under these circumstances, and it was going to be backdated, is the press release that I read.
Okay, well, that's interesting. Do you want to make a motion saying that we forgive half of the rent and encourage them to look at this program?
Yes, I would like to make that motion.
Okay, and who would someone like to second it?
I'll second it. Get it on the table.
Okay, Andy seconds it. Okay.
I see Chris's hands up there too. I'd like to have his
Sorry.
Wait. What? Hold on.
Hold on. Wait.
Stu, did you want to say anything else about it?
I think I've spoken enough. I'm not.
Okay. And so now Andy's the seconder, so I'm going to go to him, and then I will go to Dirk and Chris. And I'm sorry if I missed the order.
So I'm interested to hear what Chris has to say as well. And I think that I'd like to know the extent of support that's available before making a decision on this one. So maybe Chris has some insight as well.
So for employers or business owners, the threshold is $50,000 in payroll, or was $50,000 in payroll for a $40,000 or max $40,000 forgivable loan.
No, that came down to 25,000 in payroll.
And that came down to 20,000 in payroll. As for the rental assistance, I believe, and correct me if I'm wrong, and I'll have to look more, but I believe that comes back to the landlord, not to the business owner.
So that means we apply for it?
That means the landlord or the commercial property owner would apply for it.
Can we as a municipality do that?
Huh. You know, I think we might have to do a little more research on this. Okay, Dirk, you had your hand up.
I think most of the businesses I talked to and a lot of the business assistance seem structured for businesses that have had some measure of loss of income, not a complete stop. So most of the businesses I've talked to, if they're a tenant, they've been able to negotiate a decreased rent from their landlord, given the fact that they have a decreased revenue stream. They still do have a revenue stream, and they're still able to utilize those buildings. And I think this case for me is different in that there is no potential revenue stream now, given that they can't even really go in there. And yeah, I had a second thought there, and it's completely just lost.
Okay, I'll go to Janice. Think about it. We'll come back to you. Janice, you're still muted.
Oh, sorry. I was going to look up, I was in my email because I know I got the economic development email today, and it was in there. I read it as well, but I don't know the details. It might be worth deferring this. You know, we're not going to collect the money from Flux in the next 2 weeks anyway. It might be worth deferring this just to get more information, to either give him guidance or to have some guidance ourselves.
Yeah, I think it makes sense for us to have the discussion about what we would like to do, because we also have the Pottery Society in that same building who pay us a small rent, but they do pay us rent. And we probably need to have a consistent policy about our tenants. We also have tenants in Golden Bear, for instance. So maybe rather than making a decision on Flux, we could make a decision on how we want to handle municipal facility rents. Christy.
So I can read you the government site here, like what's written here about this loan program. Okay.
Yeah.
The government intends to introduce the Canada Emergency Commercial Rent Assistance for small businesses. The program will seek to provide loans, including forgivable loans, to commercial property owners, who in turn will lower or forgo the rent of small businesses for the months of April, retroactive, May, and June.
Right.
Okay, so does that mean we don't qualify because
I haven't read into it enough to see if municipal qualifies, but quite likely not. But Flux would not qualify for this one because they're not the commercial business or commercial property owner.
But they would qualify for the $40,000 loan, of which 25% of it is forgivable.
So this is just the rent program that you were discussing? So that's
Actually,
yeah.
They probably wouldn't qualify for the loan either because they don't have 20,000 in payroll.
I don't know their financials, but I am guessing they don't, and they're not even 12 months in yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. And there are other stipulations, like your books have to be in order.
Right.
They could be in a rough spot because they don't have numbers for a previous financial filings to draw from for these programs, if that is what they are requiring.
True.
Well, I wonder if it makes sense for us to discuss how we want to handle rent from our tenants where we've closed the buildings, and maybe the caveat there would be we would like if there's other programs out there that we would be eligible to get that money from, we could get it, and I have no idea if that's true. Okay, I see lots of hands. Let's see, Dirk.
I think to your last point, because they are not capable of continued revenue streams, my vote in this is to waive the rent until this is over. It's not costing us anything. We're not making anything, but I don't think we're paying a mortgage on the building or, something that we need to recover. So my vote will be to waive it.
Okay, like back to March 16th when the COVID, or whatever date we closed the building.
No, I think they've only asked for beginning of April. I think that's reasonable.
Okay, Janice, I think you were next. Then
yeah, I was going to say, when we were talking about all the groups, I do agree if we can't find any other program for them. I would also, because we've closed the building, it's out of everybody's control. I'd be happy to waive their fees. When we were talking about other entities that are renting from us, I know the BC government, I was reading the programs today, and there is a program for daycares to cover their fixed costs while they're not operating or not fully operating. So, I don't know that we can just make a blanket statement for all our lessees.
Well, we might be able to if as a council we decided we didn't want to collect rent from our tenants who are closed, and we in buildings we've closed or that they're out of operation, we could make a blanket statement that we don't want them to pay rent, but we want them to find, if there's programs that apply, they do the programs first before they don't pay us, something like that. Stuart, your hand was up.
Frozen.
Oh, Stuart, he's frozen. Frozen.
It's concentrating.
Yeah, he's concentrating really hard. Okay, so Stuart. Stuart, you're frozen. We can't hear you. I'm going to go to Andy. Andy.
I'm going to prefer to defer this until we get more information, because I think that Flux in his situation, just because he's our tenant in the miners hall, he wouldn't be open irregardless of whether a rental space, whether it was the city property or whether it was a commercial property on the main street. He'd be forced to close, and under the circumstances, I don't think that we should be precluding the city from potential revenue if he's in a position to be able to get some support. If he's not, that's a different equation. I think we should find that out first before we make any decision here.
Okay, Chris, and then Dirk.
Well, that's a good point, Andy. I know that if my landlord locked me out of any one of my businesses, I wouldn't be paying him rent. you know, it would be nice for Flux to go in, to be able to go in there. I don't know if he can even go in there, but to be able to go in there and do some work in his business. You know, Trinda gets to come in here and set up her inventory for when we open again. So, you know, I think that if we're going to give relief for anything that we can, if we've locked him out, it's regardless of whether he wouldn't be able to operate anyway, he'd still be able to go there and run his business with no tenants or with no customers.
And if municipalities don't apply for these landlord rent relief programs, he's doubly screwed, because if he had his business in another place and that landlord could get was eligible for one of those programs, you know. Okay, Dirk.
Well, I think in this case it is the choice of the landlord, and I don't think we can draw a fair comparison. If he were in a street side business building and he were renting, we don't know whether or not that landlord would forgive the rent. So I think doing the right thing as this case, as us as the landlord, would be to forgive the rent, not based on whether or not somebody else may forgive the rent.
Can I raise my hand? Because
yes. Christy.
Okay, a couple things just to give some background information on some of the comments made. One is to Janice's comment about not making a blanket policy. The other two organizations or businesses that rent from us that we would have to consider, they all have 3 different categories which could change their eligibility for different programs. One would be a registered charity, one's a not-for-profit, and then this one here we're talking about is a small business. So they could have all completely different eligibility for federal and provincial programs. So it may be something you want to consider looking at one-offs anyway. And then the other thing to consider is that this is the only one of those 3 that is paying market value for their space. They are paying proper full market value of $17.50 a month. Yeah, top market value for our community.
That is.
Okay, well, I mean, could we say that as the landlord for these tenants, whether they're nonprofits or for-profit, that we will forego rent during this period, and we want them to find programs. If they're eligible for a program, great. If they're not, or maybe we direct staff to help them see if they're eligible. If they're eligible, they pay. If they aren't eligible, we forgive. I don't know if that would work, but I absolutely agree. I think we've shut the buildings due to COVID. They can't operate their businesses, and it's something we can do to help, and I think we should. But anyway, we do need a motion on the table. We don't have one.
I think we actually already have a motion on the table. Is just to reduce it by 50% right now. Ah,
okay. So there's a motion to reduce it by 50%, and that was with the understanding that they'd be able to get help elsewhere.
I think what we were just talking about as a staff here is that Christy would be able to take some time to talk to all of our leaseholders and our lessees and see what kind of programs they might be able to help look at least investigating in regards to before they come to council or come to us for for rent relief, which is why we're kind of focusing on the Flux only right now at this time, because it's kind of a more unique situation.
Okay, so we could make a motion to defer and have staff do some research and have the research cover all of our tenants. And
I would just actually, staff would recommend that we actually continue with that, with the 50% reduction from Flux, because it is our facility and we closed it down and they have absolutely no way to do anything. And did that as a temporary measure for the time being. We would, in addition to that, we would sit down and look to try to find out any type of other things that we can do for cost recovery at this facility and help out with any other community organization that might be using a facility in conjunction with the city of Roslyn.
Okay, well, I'd actually vote against it because I don't think we should ask them to pay 50% personally. But the motion is on the table. Right now we have a motion that we would ask them to pay 50%. And then staff, right? What?
Darren just had his phone in front of his head.
What?
Sorry, Darren just had his phone in front of his head.
Oh, I missed it. Okay, so there's a motion on the table that we provide Flux with a 50% reduction in their rent as of April 1st, I think. That's the most. Stu, that was your motion, right? Stu, go ahead. You're muted. You're muted.
Muted still. Muted.
Hit it twice.
There you go.
Ah. Yeah, I think my motion was predicated on the understanding that they would be eligible for some sort of help for the other portion, which I don't really know if that's the case. So perhaps it's yeah. I mean, I don't know if I can. I'd probably like more clarity on what the actual options are for them, and perhaps something more along the lines of working with staff to identify what they can and can't do, and for the city to pick up the slack.
Okay, so we could defeat this motion and you could make another one. Or we could pass
Okay.
it if it's the will of council.
Okay, sure.
I'm going to call the question on this one, and please vote with your hands, your little blue hands there, because I can't see you all. Okay, so the motion is that we give them a 50% reduction off their rent starting in April. Who's in favor? Nobody. Who's opposed? Everybody. I can't even raise my hand. Okay. Yeah, okay. Okay, so we're not doing that. So let's have another motion. Anybody have an idea for another motion? Dirk.
Can I make a motion that we forgive their rent until this order from BC is over? And if there are opportunities that we can find something to cover it, then we do that ourselves or with them. I would rather leave them in the position of thinking that they don't owe anything. So, I know, confusing. Motion, we forgive their rent.
Yeah, maybe it's better. Maybe it's better just to, direct staff to I think staff is pretty clear. Our understanding here as a group is that we want to help them, right? If we just direct staff to figure out, help them figure out if they're eligible for anything. If they are, great, go for it. And if they aren't, then we forgive it. But let's direct staff to get more information, because I think we're all pretty sure we don't have enough information. And let me see what Stuart has to say there. Stuart?
I'd also suggest that this is evolving, that the government seems to be coming up with programs by the day for all of the small little gaps that haven't been addressed. And if these sort of small businesses, are something that's falling through the cracks right now, the way things are going, it could be a few days and there may be a program that covers them directly.
Right.
So, I think, getting staff to work with with the group and be adaptable to whatever subsidies are available from high levels of government, and that we forgive whatever is necessary after we've exhausted all those possibilities.
Okay, so how about the motion that we direct staff to work with our various tenants to figure out what programs they are eligible for, with the understanding that we're going to forgive them rent for this period, or at least for 2 months, or whatever we want to say, something like that. Christy, does that work for you? Does that give you enough direction to figure out how to solve this problem?
Yeah, moving forward for the other two, it does, but I've had an official request from Flux for a month, for the month of April moving forward. So that works for the other two renters that haven't actually approached me with an official request. But I do need to go back to this business owner, and let him know about his official request to have this waived.
Okay, so back again, we still need a motion on the table. Anybody want to try their hand at a motion on the table? Yeah, sure.
I think just a comment on that last before the motion is that it strikes me that that's a fair bit of extra work for staff that are dealing with during COVID active operations and, trying to be flexible. And my preference would be just a simple motion that we waive the rent for Flux until this BC provincial order is finished.
Okay, do we have a seconder? Janice seconds. Okay, do you want to say anything else about it, Dirk?
No, for me, that just feels like the right thing to do is to landlord in this. I think Jason is, you know, they closed their facility on the 16th, and I think on the 18th they let everybody know that their memberships would be frozen, so they're not gaining it all from this. They're extending the memberships for the community that goes there. So I think they've acted really well, and I think it's our turn.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, Janice, you were the seconder. You can speak, and then Stuart.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know, one of the things about doing this is we're modeling good behavior for the rest of the landlords in town. And, you know, we have a tenant who is totally unable to operate, unable to generate any income, not even able to go in and do maintenance on his business because of this situation. You know, I mean, the Miners Hall didn't have flux for many, many years, and we still muddled along as a community. If he doesn't pay rent, if we waive his rent for the next 3 or 4 months until he's able to operate again, we'll still be a great community with a bouldering facility.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Stuart and then Andy.
Just 2 points. One is, what if, I mean, I think we're assuming that there's no directly applicable subsidy from some other level of government, but what if it's announced tomorrow or next week where, you know, this is a glaring miss and they've created a new program specifically for these sort of businesses? And 2, what if, you know, we have some level of easing of restrictions and they're able to operate but at a lower capacity? Is this up until he's able to operate in any sort of way, or we can open the doors under some sort of restrictions?
Well, the motion was
imagine not apply in that situation.
The motion was tied to the lifting of restrictions, the way Dirk phrased it. But your point is good. It still goes back to, you know, again, this does involve staff looking to help them, or with the understanding to them that they look for things that could help them, you know. Okay, Andy.
Yeah, I'm feeling the same as Stuart. I would like to see what opportunities come along. I'm thinking that maybe because of the timing, that maybe we can forgive April's loan as he's requested, but between now and 1st of May, look at opportunities that may be available to support him and or the city, because that isn't clear yet either. So I think I'd be more likely to support that than Dirk at this time.
Okay, I've got Elma's hand up.
I just want to say that, you know, we're not giving him any money. You know, like if we were actually cutting a check, you know, I would be more leery or more cautious. But all we're doing is just not billing him for the rent. And if so, you waive the rent on the condition that, you know, there's no other program that manifests itself. Otherwise, we can always charge him for rent again, right?
Okay, I'm fine with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I think we've talked about this a lot, and I think we're all on the same page. We want to help the tenant, but we don't want them to miss any opportunities if there's a way that they can help themselves. So I think that has to be communicated to them when we tell them that we're forgiving the rent, that we expect them to look for programs that you know, could make us whole again too. Okay, anything further on that? Or I'm going to call the question. Or Cynthia, would you read the motion back, please?
What I have right now is council approves the waiving of the rental fees for Flux Climbing Limited as of April 1st, 2020 until the BC provincial order regarding COVID-19 is revoked.
Okay, so I'm going to call the question. All in favor? And if you're not in favor, put your hand up. Okay, so everybody's in. Oh no, Janice, you're against it? No. Okay. Okay. Passes. Good. Okay. Good. Now, do we want to give any direction to staff to look into assistance for our other tenants? If so, somebody make a motion. Dirk.
I think make a motion. I mean, I'm sure the staff is looking out for stuff. I'm not sure how much we have to invest staff time in actively pursuing something on behalf of a tenant.
Or maybe just have the conversation with them. I don't know if they're looking, you know, maybe they don't care. Okay. So I don't hear a motion. Andy? Andy?
Oh, you're muted.
We can't hear you, Andy.
Andy, we can't hear you.
Sorry, that staff look at all options with the 3 tenants, including flex, to see what options are, and as Stu said, continue to monitor opportunities that come along from both
Okay, Andy,
provincial and federal.
were you making a motion or a comment? We didn't hear the first part of what you were saying.
No, a motion.
Okay, you're gonna have
staff. It's breaking up. That's the problem. So that staff look at opportunities for all 3 of the tenants that may be available and work with all 3.
Okay, do I have a seconder? Chris seconds. Okay, good. Okay, any further discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? And okay, anyone opposed? Okay, I don't see any opposed. Okay, so that's a motion. Thank you all. Okay, moving right along, COVID-19 Essential Services Mutual Aid Agreement. This is for the RDKB East End Services. And the motion is that we endorse this mutual aid agreement. A mover? Do I have a mover? Okay, Andy moves, Chris seconds. Any discussion on this one? Andy, anything to say?
Oh, just pleased to see it happen.
Okay, Chris, any comments?
I have a question. How come we haven't done this before?
Oh,
I mean, it just makes sense, right?
Never miss the opportunity of a good pandemic to make improvements in regional cooperation. Okay.
No, it's good. I like it.
Okay, all in favor? And no one opposed? Okay. Okay, we've got city reports for council information. We are looking at our first quarter progress report of our 2020 corporate management work plan. Does anybody have some things that they want to comment on? And if you do, put up your little blue hand so I can see it. Or we're all just happy with that. This is just for information. Okay, it was great. So good to see it. Updated task list. Anybody have any comments on that? I did notice that the direction to investigate remote council meetings suddenly jumped from a low priority to an extremely high one. I thought that was kind of funny. Okay. And the other thing in there on that one, in fact, wait a minute, let me get to the thing. There was one about the business license. I gotta check the other thing. Okay, hold on one second, guys, sorry. Which one was it? The one about investigating. Was just, oh, okay. Directs council to investigate applicable provincial federal criteria in order to develop a system to waive business license fees for the year 2020. It's looking at it for the summer and as a medium priority. And I don't know whether it seems like programs are coming out all the time. I wonder if we want to pursue that, if it needs to be a little higher priority because people are, struggling now. Just throwing that out there. Okay, moving on. Member reports. Who shall we start with? I think we'll start with Janice because I see her.
Thank you, Kathy. Let's see, I worked with Heather Anderson, who's the age-friendly coordinator, Stephanie Hukas, who's the Better at Home coordinator, Derek, whose last name I can't remember, our community paramedicine provider, Kim McMartin from Ferrero's, Kathy at Alpine, Michael, my husband from Rotary, and Bill Porfili from the Lions Club to coordinate volunteers for home delivery of groceries and pharmacy items, for Roslyn residents who are unable to get safely out, and to print and distribute flyers physically and through social media to inform the public that help is available. And it has.
How many are using it? How many people are using it?
It's been, I can only judge by the number of calls Michael has gotten. It's been moderately used. It was really heavy at the beginning, We had a number of people who traveled and were quarantined that used it a couple of times. But I think in general, people are, they have family or they have friends or someone else in their building. So really there's just a couple of 3 people who are using it about once a week now for Michael. And he's not getting a lot of reports from other people that there's a lot of calls coming in. So, but I think people are just happy to know it's there.
Okay, great.
Yeah, and it was a pleasure to work with everyone and get it up and running. And Stephanie was brand new at Better at Home. It's like, well, welcome to Better at Home. There's a pandemic, ready to go. Yeah, so I attended a Recreation Task Force meeting to finalize the presentation report presented this evening to Council. They're a very impressive group of people to work with, and I thank them immensely for their time and assistance. I Zoomed with the Lower Columbia Business Women's Club on their weekly call. The theme was financial options for small businesses and owners, which, as we know, the options are changing constantly. There were 3 financial representatives on the call offering to advise the group. So they were talking about the loans at that time that were currently available, loans, grant programs, et cetera, et cetera. And I presented a PowerPoint presentation outlining the provincial tax deferment programs that were available. It was very well received. So yeah, it was very positive. It's a great group, and they have their meeting just before the the roundtable one on Tuesday. So yeah, I attended a Midtown transition meeting. We're currently waiting on the BC Housing Energy Modeling Consultant to provide feedback on the proposed building plans to further define the cost of future cost of construction. And the only other thing I had was if we're sending out a newsletter, to remind folks about physical distancing. As the weather gets nice and people have been cooped up for a while, you can see that they are getting a little antsy. And, you know, the longer we can stick at it as a group, the sooner we'll be through it. So, but I thank everyone for all their efforts thus far.
Okay, great, thanks. Stuart, you're up next. But you're muted, you're muted.
I've been peripherally involved in the REC task force as the reports come together. I just note that I've been very busy in endless damage control mode, engaging in social media, feeling a bit of sympathy with Kathy there, and adapting policy and trying to manage humans to keep the KCTS trail network open as people behave like people do.
Okay. Is that it?
That's it.
Dirk, you're up.
I think the RAS asked me to pass along that at the end of the year, their net fundraising was around just shy of $50,000. And I know they're working on some projects with respect to the lounge and Rotary. Library board meeting, they're reviewing policies and trying to work through some of the challenges of being closed in the library, still doing a lot of digital outreach and lots of courses and reading and stuff you can still do with your library card. An important thing is they are looking for new board members. They had Alan Stanley had retired from the board, or resigned from the board, I guess, and so they are quite active in their search for new members. So anybody knowing somebody that would like to work on the library board, it's a very cool group. The Climate Caucus, I missed the meeting today because my 5- and 6-year-old were doing math with their grandmother and our bandwidth isn't enough. Shout out to TELUS to have 2 Zooms at the same time. But they did send a letter to Trudeau really looking at investing in people, legislating the UNDRIP, invest in restoring ecosystems, invest in public and active transportation and infrastructure, renewable energy infrastructure, local food security, small businesses, zero waste, and divesting from fossil fuels as a pressure from communities across the country as we come out of this crisis to come out in a better way than we went in. Not return to normal, which seems to be kind of the language that we're hearing. 100% renewables meeting with Stacy and Kathy. Unfortunately, I could only do the first one of the meetings before I was in isolation in a van with 2 small children for too long. And the going through the big 6 moves that Eco Society and the CEA, the Community Energy Association, have put forward as things that potentially the city can do. And it was nice to see, Stacy commented on a lot, that we're already doing a lot of the things that they think we should do in the future. So I felt good that we're moving in the right direction. And then I got a note from Craig DeLong asking for city support in their application to CBT, a letter only to request city support to get their zero plastics, plastic recycling initiative up, which works well with the circular economy that we talked earlier. So I don't know, do I do a motion for that then? Can we do a motion that the city supports it with a letter?
Sure. A seconder? Okay, yeah. Do you guys all know about this thing they're doing there? Yeah, Janice seconds. They're doing this event on the weekend as a fundraiser too. It's the machinery that takes plastic and turns it into like plastic thread you can use for 3D printers and create other stuff. It's pretty cool. Okay, so I'll call the question on supporting the letter of support. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Okay, we'll write the letter. Good. So. And
then finally, because I don't know where this fits in, but I feel like we have scooted by opportunities to talk about the city and its sort of driving forward in the face of COVID without a very transparent or active approach to cost savings. So I don't know where we have that conversation. I'm still keen to have it.
Yeah. All right, let's just get through the rest of, the members' reports, and let's go back to that thought, okay? Because I'm not quite sure how we're going to structure that. Andy, you're up.
I had submitted a report on the weekend for multiple meetings attended through the month of March. I didn't know if there were any specific questions or comments about those. About that report.
Yeah, thank you for that. Does anybody have any questions for Andy?
Yeah.
Stuart has one.
Okay.
Wait, Stuart, we don't hear you.
Okay, hear me now?
Yeah.
The 10.9% cost increase for into 2020 just struck me as, well, extravagant. What's going on there?
Well, a substantial increase in costs, everything from the fire service, hiring, deputy fire chief. Of course, it's 10.9% total, and of course we don't contribute or are participants in all the services that the regional district does. So they also hired a new bylaw officer. There's been some new hires. Increased expenses all around. The dam, the issue on the dam, revenues that come back through Fortis and BC Hydro, about $400,000 was in limbo there. That's still being sorted out. There may be an adjustment on that once that's decided. I think I'm still confused about how that whole process works. The ownership of the dam, the tech is back leasing it back now. So it's been a bunch of confusion there, but it's about $400,000 they've been talking about there as well. So there's been a number of cost increases. However, they have dipped into reserves to offset some of that. And as they call it, they smooth the increases somewhat.
Hey, Andy, I thought that the board had voted to take $300,000 each year for the next 3 or 5 years or something to put into the fire service.
That's still the case, Kathy, and that they were successful in having that that allotment into that fire service. So that continues. But that 400,000 was something related to the actual provincial assessment of the dam ownership, and it's a bit of a mess. So they're trying to sort that out. I know.
Yeah, I don't know how that relates to revenues coming into the RDKB or into the East End services.
It went into general funds actually. So that was since general administration. That benefited the whole budget
Right.
of the regional district.
And then when you talk about them hiring a bylaw officer, that's one of the services that we don't participate in.
Correct.
So,
Correct.
Yeah. So that's one thing to think about it'd be interesting to know what our actual, it's really hard with the regional district because they take a bunch from reserves to pay for a lot of the services. So they don't, if they do an increase in something, sometimes they take money from elsewhere. And so they don't actually have a tax increase, but it's completely unsustainable. So
did folks see that list that I provided to see the actual requisition items is a good one because it's individual payouts that Roslyn taxpayers are submitting or in the total overall cost of us supporting business or those supporting those services down in the regional district.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, the requisition.
Stuart, did that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I don't expect Andy's going to have the great answer for me. It just I got to take a moment to vent my frustration that this is a significant part of the taxes we pay. And I know when we get our tax bill every year, it's Roslyn's responsible for its part of it, but a significant part of it and an increasing part of it is going down the hill, and we don't have no accountability about keeping that in any sort of under control.
Yep, that's an age-old problem for sure. Okay, Andy, anything else?
I attended a couple of more meetings this week, and I'll have some notes coming forward with that. There was a concern about new fire regulations, so it's important that our citizens recognize, and I hope they do, that the province has initiated a level 2-3 restrictions are in place. Also noted that the level 2 restriction included fireworks restrictions, and I think most people are adhering. The last few nights I haven't heard fireworks, so but really important. There's been conversations around campfires too, which is interesting around the community.
Yeah, the city's putting out a bulletin that's talking about a lot of the, like the spring cleanup, and it's also talking about the burning bylaws, and that's coming out very, very soon. In fact, I don't know, maybe tomorrow, who knows? Okay, Chris.
Great.
Oh, sorry. Are you finished, Andy? Yeah, okay. Chris?
To your point, Andy, and to everybody, we have, because of the fire ban, we've stopped selling fireworks. So it's probably one of the reasons why there's no fireworks out there right now. We just got a huge load of them, so I've got to put them all in the back in a box because it's like candy. On the 7th and 14th, attended Kathy as well with the South Kootenay COVID-19 Business Virtual Roundtable. As mentioned, some excellent speakers the last 2 weeks, both in MLA Conroy and MP Cannings. And the RCMP are on it when it comes to protecting our businesses and what's happening in downtown Trail for sure. Up here, we still don't have a problem, which is great. Specific focus on how everybody is coping and what the future is beginning to look like, and a good roundtable with ideas and concerns for everybody. Tomorrow I've got a meeting with the local physicians regarding opportunities for a local primary care clinic here. They called me out last week. So the purpose is to communicate regarding potential future of our local medical services here. I'm going to be new to this, so I'll learn a little bit and I'll pass it on when I get there. Roslyn Heritage Commission meeting on the 27th. It's our first virtual one. The agenda has, more options for fundraising and a continuation of the cemetery mapping project. They canceled the Heritage presentation, or the Heritage, what was it? In May 7th,
the conference.
They canceled that. Or March 7th, yeah. The one where Jackie was going to get
Don't get us
awarded. Was going to get awarded. Well, you've been married for a long time too, Kathy. But yeah, so that was canceled. And I just want to mention that there's some happenings down in Trail with some non-essential businesses that are challenging the system and reopening this week, along with promoting shopping events such as Corona samplings while you shop. I just want to express my disappointment with this. You know, it's inconsiderate behavior, and I hope that it isn't consistent and doesn't affect others who are working hard on being responsible in this time of unrest. So that's it for me.
Yeah, wow, I hadn't heard of any of that. That's wild.
Yeah, it was ads in the paper today, or on not the paper, but on.
Okay, so we're all getting used to our new reality of life over Zoom. I'm still doing weekly calls with the mayors and Minister Robinson, and Brian's on those calls too. Those are weekly, and she shares updates on things like the last one being the reduction of school taxes and delay of tax. And then she gives us the opportunity to either ask questions verbally if there's time, or send them in email, which I've done. And then if I get a response back, I'll share the answer. Just to follow up on the Climate Caucus letter that Dirk brought up, it's being signed by various councillors and mayors all across the country. And I asked for a copy of it when all the signatures were on it to be sent back to us, and then I'll just put it out to everybody else so you can see who all is there. Dirk and Stacy and I did the 100% renewable, two meetings on that. I think Dirk pretty much covered it. It's interesting, again, it's the time we can look at making changes as we come out of this period that hopefully will make a better world as opposed to the same old world. I was on an interesting call with Selgar, and there's going to be another one this week. Selgar is in huge trouble. Now, we only have 6 Roselanders who are employees of Selgar at this point, but they employ 450 people, and they're being very aggressive about reaching out to the province for help, right? Because they say they can only last 2 more months and then they're going to shut down, and it's a huge deal. So there's an effort there to get some provincial help, which Katrina Conroy was on the call. She's fully invested in it. But there were a lot of people on the call. I mean, all the way up to people up in Caslow and Nakusp and all the way around. It was quite interesting. So they're reaching out and trying to get regional support. Chamber of Commerce, the regional roundtable that Chris mentioned was good. Then there was also the call with the RCMP and IH and emergency folks and local mayors. To me, it sounds like we're actually really well prepared should the pandemic, reach us in a really active way. But it's really good. I really appreciate the efforts that have been made there and made me feel more confident in what our response would be should it get crazy. The Tourism Roseland board meeting, obviously all the tourism businesses are really concerned. Entertainment, restaurants, hardest hit. And the point they made was the tax delay that the province offered doesn't help them, because either they're winter-based tourism, they had to shut down early, they can't make up any of their revenues before taxes are due, even at the delay with October. And the summer businesses, basically all the big events that were scheduled for Roseland have been canceled. So the summer businesses are going to be hard hit as well. Most of the big events have all been put back to next year. There's one that's, even farther than that. Did the twice a month Resort Municipality Initiative Mayor's Call, which was interesting to hear how everybody's doing. I sent some of what they're doing in their communities around in an email as far as, what they're doing with their financial plans. But they all have different challenges. Some are really concerned about visitors coming or second homeowners coming. And then there's Whistler, who says, hey, 75% of our houses are occupied by second homeowners, and they've come here to isolate. They've come here and we're not kicking them out. Whereas others are basically, barring the doors and saying, don't come. So it's quite interesting there. The Masks for All initiative is getting underway. This is Division of Family Practice has put together a toolkit. I haven't seen it yet. I talked about this before, but now that wearing masks in public is now recognized as best practice and should be encouraged. And there's going to be actually a pilot project through Divisions of Family Practice in Roseland to see about getting people who can sew the masks connected with people who would like to wear the masks. So that's going to be interesting. And at this point, it's not too organized yet, but it will be soon. But anyone who's interested in being a sewer should get in touch with me, because I'm still taking names. And actually, that is it. And I think we are done. So we will go back to Dirk's point about a conversation of targeted assistance for our community, I think is how I'd like to frame it. So Dirk, take it away.
Yeah, I think that's it. I like the fact that we're not decreasing our tax revenues or our increases. I do feel like if this extends, you know, if this pandemic is over in a month, then no big deal. We probably haven't lost a whole lot. We'll recover really quickly. If this pandemic isn't over until October, our biggest challenge is not this year. Our biggest challenge is going to be next year and all of the operating costs of next year. And watching all of these communities make these plans or you know, decreases to deal with what's happening right now, I don't think necessarily that that's prudent, but it would be nice if it felt like we were being really active as a city and preparing for the worst come January 1st, 2021. Looking at opportunities for savings. I mean, the first thing, I don't anticipate cutting a lot of my business services, but the first thing that I had to do was sit down and look at stuff that I could scrub away, things that I really didn't need, stuff that I could put off a little bit later. And I think that it behooves us as a city to do the same thing, to at least prepare for the worst. So we're not in September trying to figure out which truck we shouldn't have bought or that kind of thing.
Right. So it's sort of directing staff to create a plan B, some sort.
Well,
okay.
Yeah,
Janice?
plan B through, you know, M. And at the same time, the businesses that I've talked to in town are not worried about their business taxes and things like that. Those are not breakers. They're worried about tourists not coming back into town. So from a resiliency perspective, I think the city should have a plan to assist with that somehow. And we're going to need to find something to do, you know, savings wise to do that. So a plan for savings for a worst case scenario.
Okay, I want to make two comments and then I'm going to let Janice speak because I didn't mention this before. I'm participating in an economic resiliency plan session, which started 6 weeks ago. And it was actually came out of the flooding and the fires that the decision was made by local, regional business people. It's mostly business. It's an economic resiliency plan. And so now SFU has been involved and they put together a draft plan for the region that looks to how do we recover from a catastrophic event like a fire, like a flood, like a pandemic. So that will be addressing some of those business concerns that you're talking about. And actually the first pass at the plan is, it's either Thursday or Friday of this week. Oh, no, it's Wednesday. Sorry, it's Wednesday of this week from 9 to 12 is going to be presented to the group, which will be quite interesting. So that's one thing. The other thing is because we are a tourist town, Tourism Roslyn and all the other DMOs are working together, and they work quite closely with the Minister of Tourism, Elisa Baer, and they're looking at, you know, how we come out of that. And that's the same thing in the conversation that I just had with the RMI mayors, is the thing of how we come out of this, you know, smart, strong, ready to go. And that's one of the things that the mayors are talking about too. So some of those things that you're talking about are being looked at by these other larger groups rather than just the municipality. So that's one thing. Okay, now I'm going to Janice. Sorry, Janice.
No, that's okay. Very interesting. I just had 2 points for the group to ponder. You know, amongst ourselves or amongst people that we know, we've had a few discussions about trying to hire people or trying to bring people back. And I know that Stu and Chris both mentioned that people are getting some pretty substantial aid packages or aid from the government, and they're having trouble getting people to come back to work because they're quite happy to have the time off and have that. I also spoke with Steve Boucher from The Hill, and they do have to do, Red Mountain does have to do some heavy work this year. He was talking to one of his employees that he trained up to run the D3 CAT last year. And the employee just kind of said, oh, no, I'm good, thanks. So you know, even though we do have a certain segment, and we know that there are some people who are having some financial difficulty, we are hearing from a certain segment of the community that they think everybody's out of work. Not everybody's upset about being out of work. I had a thought about how we might pick out people who are in need, and it's just a thought for consideration, is that perhaps we set up a program that allows people to apply for penalty forgiveness for their taxes. So deadlines remain the same, and we consider what would be our guidelines to help someone. They can't pay till October or November, they have a penalty, they apply with us, they prove that the need was caused by COVID, we waive the penalty fee.
It's an interesting idea.
After the fact, but it would allow us to look at need a little more specific.
Yeah. Let's get staff to comment on that. I think that's quite a creative approach.
Yeah, I get to comment.
Yeah.
No, he didn't hear me. I said no.
Elma, come on.
Now I knew that would be what she said.
I just don't think that's a good road to go down. But you've heard enough of my nose today. So you already know how I feel.
I thought they were hiccups. No.
Hey, Alma, I have a question. How many people, or as a percentage, do you think will be the same people that don't pay this year that didn't pay last year and probably didn't pay the year before?
Always the same people that don't pay.
So are we just rewarding the people that don't pay anyway?
No, we'll exclude those people. We'll say, okay, the only people that we'll allow to forgive their penalty is if they've never been late before.
Ever, exactly. Now you got to prop that up against that.
I just think you have a tough time establishing criteria, right? That's the problem. It's not, it's not so much that maybe I don't want to. It's just that the criteria, it's hard to meet that. What proof do you have to show? Like, so much of it is private, and like, I've heard lots of excuses, like, I don't know. I don't think that's the way to go.
I think the same people that don't get the penalty, that don't pay and get the penalty, aren't going to pay in October either.
Well, yeah, maybe. Okay, let's get Stuart and then Dirk and then Janice again.
This seems sort of trivial to me. I don't see the benefit in, arguing about the, penalties on property tax. I think we've got bigger issues. I think recovery as a community is going to be pretty challenging, and there's going to be lots of opportunities. And I think if we're going to be looking to do that as best we're able, that means things like identifying, there's going to be a lot of economic stimulus money available. And I think we want to have those projects that benefit the community, that do generate economic activity and address our goals. We want them shovel ready. We want staff to be paying attention, so we're at the front of the queue, that we're doing the politics, so that we get recognized, and we get in there and we take advantage of those opportunities to actually recover. And that's where I'd be putting my effort into. I mean, I'm in my small area of interest on trails, that's certainly what we're doing. We're anticipating there's going to be money to be spent, there's going to be people to be hired, and where things are a little bit difficult right now, but we're all just tightening our belts and surviving and getting through all that. And as soon as it's available, we should be ready to go.
Okay, Dirk and then Janice. Oh, no, Janice. Okay, that was an old hand. Okay.
I think that's good in from the position, if we make an assumption that by June we're kind of getting back to normal. But I think for me, it behooves us to be responsible enough that if we're not getting back to normal by October, we have a really viable plan. We have money that we've been able to save in case things are really bad, hoping that they're not going to be really bad, but we don't know what's going to happen. And maybe a question for Alma, like, And we put together or put forward a bunch of things which kind of keep coming up with the no answer. Is there something from the city side so that, you know, that could be done, something responsible that the city could do to plan and prepare for the worst? I don't know. That's the end of my question.
All right.
I think it's 2021. Like that's, you know, we'll monitor the budgets and the expenses through the quarterly updates so that council's, you know, aware of what's happening. And we can, you know, if there are substantial savings or that council doesn't redirect through community grant programs, it can go into that financial stabilization reserve that we already have, that there's $200,000 in. And then when we look at 2021 budget, or we go into 2021, you know, maybe the business license fee can be lowered, right? So it isn't as onerous for next year. Or, you know, lower the tax rates for people, right, to 1% or something like that. Like, you know, or invest more into capital programs so that we can keep, you know, the local community working. You know, that's why we increase the miners' hall budget, so that we can, you know, keep putting money into the economy. I think, you know, that's what the federal programs are doing too. And I think if we do that locally, I think that's what's going to make us stronger. And I think it's more of a 2021 budget decision.
Okay. Anybody want to speak? I mean, it seems, I agree that I think 2021 could be the tougher year for sure. I mean, this thing didn't, in terms of tax year, you know, taxes are due in July. This thing didn't start hitting till March. So maybe that is it. I hear Dirk's concern, but I think staff is already thinking about, you know, we're thinking about what we could, I mean, we're not going out and spending like crazy, but you know, putting money into the economy is a way of stimulating the economy, is a way of helping our people. You know, I think Janice's idea of if we could come up with criteria and we're able to forgive that 10%, you know, penalty, that's like a micro aid, whereas investing in infrastructure, investing in being shovel ready and all that is more of a macro one, right? You know, so you kind of, you have two different approaches. You either look, you know, somebody either gets food stamps or they get a job, right? Or both of those things help them economically, you know, one way or the other. So it's just kind of what your approach is. You're either helping an individual, if we could figure criteria, or we're helping the community and our whole town by doing the bigger stuff. And I mean, I wish there was a way we could figure out how to do some of both, and we just haven't come to something that's the most targeted. And I wish we could. I mean, I like Janice's idea, because if we could figure criteria that it was targeted, you know, 10% of somebody's property tax bill, you know, better than $50. So anyway, Stuart.
Yeah, I just think it's misguided, the whole idea of austerity, that we need to be cutting budgets. It's just not, it's not based on economics or history. I mean, that's the way people, you know, individuals approach challenging situations. The instinct is to tighten your belt. But I mean, the evidence from history is that when you do that, it just makes things worse. I mean, that's why the Great Depression was the Great Depression, because it took 5 years for the government to realize that you have to actually invest in infrastructure and giving people jobs and, you know, developing your way out of an economic downturn. If everybody just cuts their belt, cuts their budgets, then it's just going to make it worse, and we're not going to come out of this. We have to recognize that we're going to recover because our businesses are doing business, because tourists are coming back, because people have got jobs and we've got a vibrant economy, and we have to do that. We don't achieve that by, you know, reducing the things we do.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Okay, do we have any other discussion on this? I haven't heard any motions come out of it, but I think it's an ongoing conversation that we can have, and we can all still be thinking about it and look for good ideas. And the point was made that the provincial and federal governments are coming up with new programs all the time. If we're interested in our community recovering, a lot of that help is going to come from elsewhere. And, maybe part of us just wants to do something to be helpful. And it's, one of the most important things we can do is keep our community services going. So.
The other point I just wanted to make is that things aren't going to be the same. I mean, the world is going to be different. The economy is going to be structured differently. The demand is going to be different. And, I don't have any great perspective on it, but I'm certain it's not going to be the same as it was before. And individually and for staff and collectively, we gotta somehow anticipate what that new world's going to be like and adjust what we're doing. We're probably not going to spend the same things on the, who knows what we're going to be adapting to, but we're going to have to be paying attention and be ready to adjust what we're spending our money on. But it's not spending less, it's spending differently and in the right way to come out of this stronger.
Yeah,
good point. I don't really have any great suggestions of what they're going to be, but that's what we have to do.
Okay. All right. Dirk, you had your hand up?
Well, I think I get Steve's point about austerity, but I mean, the reality is that we might be in a situation where the city doesn't have the money coming forward. We've lost a tax base or a significant portion of a resident's ability to pay for taxes. So I think for me, it's just a planning and the two different spending streams. I mean, there's spending on infrastructure projects, which makes sense. That's jobs, although anybody that's seen me lift a hammer knows that it costs more when I'm on that kind of job. But I think that's different to me than planned spending on capital purchases like trucks or I don't know, other things. I think there's two streams. I think we need to keep planning for projects, but maybe we plan for projects with a slightly older hammer rather than planning for a project with a new one. So that's, for me, it's maybe not subtle, but I think it's important that at least it's considered.
But maybe we need to invest money in different things. Maybe, just patching the roads may not be the priority, and maybe, organizing events and bringing tourists back to town, or creating things that, raise our profile, or create more long-term jobs. I don't know, but there may be ways which we want to change our priorities to develop out of this, rather than just doing the routine things. But I don't think it's a case of just, spending less. It's about finding those different needs and perhaps reprioritizing.
Well, do we, Alma, do we have a capacity to change our priorities in this? If we didn't want a dump truck and we wanted a street party, I mean, is that?
You want a street party for a dump truck?
No, like.
That's one. I know where I can get some fireworks.
Just like fire to his house, it'll be quite the show.
I think I have a problem with deferring capital in that, we did that, the city did that with its IT. And it was, and before I got here, and not because and there was just, it was always failing. It was, we had ransomware. The day that I came to work, the first day of work, there was no internet, there was no phones, there was nothing for a whole week, the first week that I got here. And that was because capital was deferred. And it took that kind of failure and council had realized that, a few months earlier that they needed to do an IT review, and they had already started putting those things in motion. But it was because of deferring capital, saying, oh, it can wait, it can wait, it can wait. And
that went on for years. That went on for years, not just with IT, but with all kinds of infrastructure investment. I think we're not talking about that. Like, I definitely don't want to go back to the days where we don't invest in our community and in our.
I don't think any of us know what those trade-offs need to be. I think Dirk was just making an example, but we may decide that we have different priorities if the world looks different than it does now.
Yeah. But I think we're on a course for the moment, and I hear Dirk's point, and I think staff hears Dirk's point. But I think at this point, we need to move forward the way we're going with our eyes wide open. And if changes need to be made, we will make them. But it's hard to make changes about something that we have no idea what we're looking at. I mean, we can, I don't know. I guess you can do disaster planning and say, and put a bunch of different scenarios together, but I don't know, you know, how effective.
It's not going to happen tonight.
It's not going to happen tonight for sure. You know. So anyway, so I think we're done. Are we done? We can all think about this some more, right?
Sure, we will talk about it many more times.
I'm sure we will.
Andy just raised a
Oh,
good
Andy?
point anyways.
I just, it was something totally unrelated. So I don't know if this is appropriate at the time, but I just wanted to say a shout out and thank you to Public Works staff. Scott, I noticed is joined us on our meeting tonight. It was great to see him there. And Darren, thank you for responding to one of my neighbors had a bit of a issue with sewer in the last couple of days, and unfortunately got his garden fertilized. But I just want to say thank you to Public Works and staff for dealing with that quickly.
Yeah, that was great.
Hey, you bet, Andy. And I'll let the guys know too, and the girls. Thank you.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, guys, I think we're done. So I'll call for a motion to adjourn. Somebody raise your hand, and Cynthia gets, okay, Andy does it, and we're good to go. Cheers.
I'll send out an invite.
All right, thanks everyone.
All right, thanks you guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Good night.